Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Now, this is the video about the Great Reset. Yeah, exactly that instance of it. It's not some sort of a Eugene the Philosopher type of metaphor. So we'll talk about the World Economic Forum treatment of the Great Reset, and also like the related conspiracy theories around it, and like even actually predating it, because the term is actually not new. And I actually encourage you to like partake in sort of like a web archaeology of sorts. Like if you search for the term in previous decade or about so, like before it was announced by the WEF, the World Economic Forum, you'll find many more instances of mentioning of that, of various sorts. And it's actually very curious. Like, after the Chinese flu thing, I've been curious about like previous, estimates and previous like forecasts of possible pandemics of this sort. And it's actually really interesting. Like even looking at 2018, 2019, like articles about this sort of thing or the possibility thereof, like it's really cool. So anyway, we're gonna focus on WEF statements and maybe like slightly discussing the conspiracy theories around it. Okay? Even though actually like some of the conspiracy theories have come up with this term earlier, but then again, there were many more instances of this term being used even before that. So anyway, let's start with the main point, which I will try to clarify later. And the main point of this video is that there is not going to be any Great Reset at all. Okay, this is the main point. Now let's try to unravel this. So if we try to give a definition of any useful sort to the term reset, what does it mean? It basically means we're starting anew in a way, right? We're kind of rebooting the whole system, right? So in terms of like society and power and politics and economics, what does that mean? Well, it means like we currently have some sort of landscape in all of these senses, but we're gonna reboot it, we're gonna change it into something completely different, right? So that would be a reset in economic terms, in political terms, in like societal terms, etc., etc. So what it means in terms of like power, both in economics, politics, society, it means that, for example, the current elites would probably not be elites anymore, and the current like dirt poor people, homeless people, for example, would not be dirt poor and homeless anymore. So maybe one example of the Great Reset could be that they would switch places, for example, like all the ultra rich people would become dirt poor and homeless, and all the dirt poor and homeless people would become ultra rich. That would be a Great Reset. I would agree with that, right? However, as you can see, I hope at least, that ain't happening, probably at least, with like 99.99999% probability, right? This isn't gonna happen. By the way, watch my video, Probability and Possibility. But anyway, so like the very fact that richest of the rich, which is the WEF, are even proposing any sort of Great Reset, means that it's kind of iffy, right? It's kind of sketchy. Like, I mean, come on. Elites, which they are interested in, well, by elites, I don't mean like elites in moral sense or any sort of like, virtue kind of sense. I just mean the people with the most power, right? However they acquired it. So, they are interested, obviously, in preservation, right? In propagation of the current state of things, because they're at the top already. So why would they wish this to change, right? They would like to stay at the top, and it's completely understandable. So, if they proclaim there is some sort of great reset coming, it's kind of questionable, at the very least, right? I would understand it if some sort of again, some sort of ragtag team of revolutionaries would have proclaimed it. Like, we're gonna establish a great reset, like join the cause, like V equals vendetta or whatever, you know, this sort of thing. But it would be understandable at least, but it would be still suspicious. I mean, you would probably suspect that they are being paid by some, like, let's say, they're being paid to, like, kick out the larger elites by smaller elites or something like that. So it would be still a struggle between elites, right? Because otherwise you would see this ragtag team of whatever revolutionaries, and you would think, okay, the elites have like almost like 99% of like military intelligence, like information, resources, power in the world. Like, can they not like dismantle this ragtag team? So yeah, it would be really suspicious. So they should have some support from above, so to speak. But anyway, this doesn't really relate to our topic. So when the elites themselves proclaim any sort of reset, it looks strange at the very least, right? Hence, so that was kind of the clarification of my main point, and now we're going to ruminate on it a little bit more. So hence, I think no significant change in power dynamics is expected, right, from this reset, whatever the heck it is. So yeah, I expect no great reset of any significant sort to come. Maybe, and again, returning to this, my point about revolutionaries, there may be some struggle among the elites, like in a horizontal sense, right? Like one guy wants to be a little bit higher than the other, but that's about it. And again, see my video ongoing virtual war. There I talk about like the current struggle between like the hegemon, which is the United States at the moment, sub-hegemon, which is the UK, and like the third power, which is the EU, and EU surpassing UK. That's basically the geopolitical dynamics of the moment, connected to the Chinese flu war. But we'll talk about it a little bit more later. But again, in the video I discuss much more details about this in the video called Ongoing Virtual War. Here I'm gonna focus on Chinese flu a little bit more later, in the later stages of this video. So again, not more than the struggle between elites is possible as the Great Reset, which is not great at all in this sense. It's just like literally like changing spots in a huge table, you know, with like 100 people on the top and like billions at the bottom. So number 59 comes on the top of number 58, right? This is the Great Reset that is possible, surely, yeah. But nothing more than that. So they could basically there could be, and it actually happens, a gradual increase in elites' power, but no hard reset to any sort of unknown state can be forecasted at this moment, right? So, and again, Chinese flu in itself is not something dramatic, is not something really like super new, super, I don't know, out of this universe, you know. It's just it's just a modern form of warfare. And what is warfare? It's basically kind of deciding who is on the top, right? Who has more power than the other guy. So, and obviously as other forms of warfare, other wars in itself, it brings up some new tech development, which is again something we'll mention later in this video, and plus obviously some other things. So it's not something completely new, the Chinese flu, I mean, and the situation around it even more so, because what we observe currently is that rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer, and that's pretty much the whole thing we've been observing in the last, I don't know, 50 years or so, or even more, maybe 100 years or so. And the middle class is pushed down by all these measures and on everything we see around us in the last decades. Well, even more so in the last couple of years, right, with the Chinese flu kind of thing. So, and it all happens as usual thanks to governments and their actions and stuff, and their reactions to the world-breaking apocalyptic situation of Chinese flu, right? So, what do I mean when I'm saying that the rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer? Well, firstly, you can easily find this info on your own. Like, literally, like, since 2020, the situation has gotten so much worse than it was previously that it's actually kind of hard to believe in this sense, in the sense of inequality and stuff. And again, it's all thanks to the governments. Like, I'm not sure if you're aware, you probably are, but if you're watching this video, but in the last 2 years, literally since January 2020, like all the major central banks, like in Switzerland, UK, US, I mean the Fed, Japan, etc., etc. So if you look at all these major banks, their assets, and I'm not sure I'm using this term correctly, but well, balance sheets maybe, also not sure if it's correct term, but they've increased by 75% in literally 2 years. It's quite a lot, you know, like it hasn't been observed ever in history, you know, it's basically like an exponential growth. So yeah, it's kind of sketchy, you know. And where do you think all this money goes? To stock market, obviously, to other banks, other bankers and stuff. So it used to be like, these banks that I mentioned, total assets like $16 trillion. Now it's like 28. So that's in 2 years, that's the difference. So yeah, obviously, well, I've already mentioned where this money goes, and then from the banks and from the stock market, it goes to large industries, big pharma, you know what I mean? Obviously, arms producers like large agricultural companies like Monsanto and stuff. Like, well, basically the big, the rich, you know. So yeah, it really shows you how it works, like the mechanism. The governments print money, the money goes to somebody rich, which is bankers, then the bankers give the money to somebody also rich but not so rich, which is like industry, agriculture, pharma, military complex. And from there, it slowly spreads into the society. And there's a so-called Cantillon effect, that is Cantillon. That's Richard Cantillon or Richard Cantillon. I don't know. He's like Irish and French and kind of English. I don't know. So basically, he's from like 17th and 18th century, I believe. Anyway, like early market-oriented thinker. So what he came up with is this understanding of how inflation works. So inflation has a lag, like a temporal lag, and he explained it like, okay, well, I'm gonna just rephrase it simply. So there is a source of money, and it gives money to somebody else, and then somebody else gives money to somebody else again, and then the money kind of spreads, right? And so inflation is only being experienced in a bigger degree the lower you are in this hierarchy of spreading of money. So an easy example, imagine you have a country with 100 kilograms of gold, like total. That's the whole money the country has, just as an example, like abstract. And then a ship arrives to this country carrying 50 kilograms of gold. So that's equal to half of the whole of the country's wealth, money. And so the sailors, the captain, whatever, the personnel of this ship, the crew, start spending this gold that they brought in this country. And the prices in this country are only adjusted to 100 kilograms so far. And they don't know yet that there is 50 extra kilograms that have just arrived, right? And so the more the spending goes, the more the money spreads throughout the country, the more the prices go up, because they say, oh, hell, look at this. Like there's a lot of demand. We should raise prices. We can't produce as much and stuff. So the prices go up, and the last guy who receives any sort of money from this ship would experience these higher prices already, right? When the ship just arrived, the prices were kind of low. And when the last guy receives the piece of gold from the ship, the prices are already high, right? So that's how, that's like a hidden type of redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich, actually, right? So it's the poor who experience inflation more than the rich, because the poor receive money the last, you know. It's first the bankers, as I've said, then the industry, blah, blah, blah. So this is the Cantillon effect. Hopefully it's understandable. And I've also talked about this in my video, Archimedes' Lever of Speculation. Again, I'll put all the links in the description. And I've talked about how, like, fiat currencies are bad, and hopefully right now you can experience that, like, in real time, so to speak, how no competition in money, like the government decree of only allowing this type of money, like only American dollars in the US, or only Japanese yen in Japan, or whatever, you name it, in the appropriate country, is really bad, because people cannot emit their own money. And if they could, then only the non-inflationary money would succeed. Like, if you have a choice between the money that inflates and the money that doesn't, you obviously would choose the latter, right? Because why would you need something that you can buy less stuff tomorrow on rather than more stuff, right? Okay, that was a huge digression. My apologies. So, returning to the topic, you may ask, okay, Eugene, there is no Great Reset. Well, what's the fuss about it with WEF and all these conspiracy theorists, etc.? Well, I can tell you what's the fuss about it, I think so, at least, with regards to the World Economic Forum. So why do they promote this agenda so hard at the moment? And I believe that the only reason for that is that it's just an excuse, a smokescreen, if you like deliberetely confusing and lacking substance. And actually, like, before making this video, I've watched a few videos of people who were trying to explain what this Great Reset proposed by WEF is, and nobody could. Like, they said, it's really confusing. It's really saying nothing about anything, really, you know. Just says, oh, sustainable, oh, better future, oh, like green economy, but nothing about any sort of reset. Like, really, what's gonna reset? Who is gonna reset? How exactly? No answer at all. So, yeah, it's deliberately, I believe, confusing. Maybe not in sort of deliberately, like evil Freemason type of deliberately, or reptiloid from Nibiru type of deliberately, but it's kind of like half intuitive, maybe, Like they kind of knew they needed to make some sort of announcement of this sort. Forgive me for my tautology as usual, but it's definitely deliberate. Like they wanted it to be there, even if it was kind of irrational. Maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But anyway, the point is, it's deliberately confusing and lacking substance, and hence actually it breeds more and more conspiracies about it. Like people don't understand what it was all about, and they start like thinking up, like inventing more stuff on top of it, if you know what I mean. Like if you don't have information, like well, I wanted to quote Goya with like the dream of mind breeds like monsters, but what I really wanted to say is that if you have no information, your mind starts struggling and inventing all kinds of stuff, right? On top of this darkness, roughly speaking. So yeah, definitely this confusing character of WEF statements, it has created a lot of conspiracy theories. But I don't think they're justified, most of them at least. I think it's actually much more simple. It's, again, let me continue my point. It's deliberately confusing in a way that basically the whole point is to make no change but proclaim that the change is gonna be made, right? So it's a smokescreen. Like we say, okay, things are gonna be different from now on, hence Great Reset. But in reality, things are actually not different at all. They just proceed as they were, right? So that's the whole point, in my opinion. So, and hence again, the grand confusion, as I would have rather called it, about the Great Reset, and hence the heavy advertisement that they've ordered from all kinds of celebrities. And again, you can find it on their channel on YouTube and everywhere else on the web. And again, it's kind of showing that it's celebrities, so it's just popular people who have nothing to do with economy or like money or whatever. Well, I mean, they have money, but not in the sense of like theory about money and stuff or how economy works. So it's a loud proclaim of change where not only there is no change, but even the previous tendency of, again, like rich getting richer and poor getting poorer is accelerated exponentially, right? Again, I've already given you this figure about the bank assets, and again, like look at the money supply, which like doubled just in the US, I think, in a couple of years, or like 3 or 4 years at the very least. So it's just horrible. It's a horrific figures. I mean, it's not a reset. It's just like acceleration, a horrific acceleration of a previous inflationary tendencies of the socialistic governments, including the United States government. Yeah, it's really terrifying in this sense. But it's not a reset. It's just the continuation of a previous downward trend of the society, right? Well, downward, it's a kind of a moralistic judgment, so, okay, never mind that. Let's just say over a previous trend, period. And then again, they themselves state, even though I haven't been able to find the actual origin of this quote, but a lot of like conspiracy-oriented websites quote it, and even give the video, supposedly from the WEF, but I'm not sure it's from them, even though I can easily believe it is. So I just can't be sure, right? But I can easily believe it is. So the quote is, "You'll owe nothing and you'll be happy," right? And this is exactly what is happening, right? As I've said, like rich getting richer, poor getting poorer, thanks to the governments and the World Economic Forum that gathers all the governments together and like discusses with them how we're gonna lobby our policies and how the governments are gonna help them, right, in this, by, again, suppressing their own citizens. And I say their own almost in a way that as if the citizens were slaves, and this is kind of justified, and we'll talk about this in a minute or two. So, we'll take away your stuff is basically their slogan, right? Which is a completely socialistic stuff. I mean, you'll own nothing, which means we'll take away all that you own so far. So socialistic tendencies prevail, and even an illusion of democracy we've had previously is getting demolished. Like, again, look at the United States elections. Well, I mean, they're kind of rigged always. They have been for the last 200 years. Just look at how their results are called. It's like by the press, right? Which basically the press has the authority over the popular election, and plus you have the electoral college and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go into that. Plus, look at the Brexit voting. Now people are saying, oh, let's revisit it. Let's vote one other time, right? So, yeah, that sounds like a good democracy to me. Yeah. And since we're like I've said, like, well, supposedly they've said actually, you own nothing. You also don't own even your own body, right? Which is what I talked about in my video, Final Frontier. Where I talk about the right of self-ownership, and that it is really the last resort of freedom that is still remaining. I mean, the governments are already taking away our possessions in terms of like money and even property, but at least they haven't yet taken away our bodies. Well, it has already started. They have already started doing that with the Chinese flu injections. I mean, obviously I'm being deliberately careful with my phrasing, right? You know why, I hope. So yeah, basically, self-ownership goes out of the window. Now even your own body is not your own body, because you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, as they say in the WEF. One other thing I wanted to, let's talk about the Chinese flu for a moment, because again, this is one of the parts of the supposedly Great Reset plan of our reptiloids from Nibiru to colonize us. So I believe, like, one of the conspiracy theory, one of the very popular ones, is that like the Chinese flu was deliberately released to depopulate the earth, right? Because supposedly like 500 million or 1 billion is much easier to control and blah, 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 right? Something like that. So let's reduce the population or something like that. But to this, I actually think it's a rubbish idea, because, well, one point is that I hope that whoever people are supposedly launching this grand plan, I hope they are smart. And this might be a long shot of a hope, but still, I think if they are smart, they already understand what I'm about to say, which means that it wasn't the plan. In fact, okay, let me just proceed. So, firstly, if you depopulate the earth, who's gonna work? That's one question. Well, you can say the robots are gonna work. Well, who's gonna maintain the robots? Who's gonna teach the people who maintain the robots? Who's gonna provide food for people who teach and people who maintain the robots? Who's gonna build the roads for people who provide food, for people who teach, for people who maintain the robots to be fed, etc., etc. Like, look at my previous video, Hyper Reality, where I gave more examples of these sorts of networks, right? You need a lot of people anyway, right? Well, that's just one point. How are you gonna maintain the whole thing? Another thing is that, well, all these rich people received their money from other people. Well, of course, now the Fed can print money, etc., etc. But in order for their money to be worth anything, there should be other people who produce this anything to be bought for the money of the rich, right? If you don't have anything produced, by other people, then your money worth nothing. Imagine you're alone, like completely alone on Earth, with like $100 billion. What are you gonna buy for it? Nothing, because there's no one else to provide anything for you for this money, right? So that's why you need other people, and the more the better, because they will produce more stuff for you to buy, etc. And overall, it looks like the Chinese flu is not a grand scheme of depopulating the Earth, but it's rather a sandbox, or at least it became so, for many things, really. There are obviously many interested parties involved, so and it's obvious how the whole world jumped onto the bandwagon, so a lot of people are interested in this, okay? So yeah. So what do I think about its origins? Well, I've already made a post in like July of 2020 that I think it genuinely comes from the lab, firstly, but I think it wasn't released on purpose. Like, I think it was released accidentally, but then everyone jumped on the bandwagon. And the fact that it was released accidentally, it can be supported, well, not the fact, like my opinion, can be supported by the facts of how, like, viciously, especially Chinese and in partly Western governments were trying to, like, erase all the data of its origins, right? So they were panicking and trying to, like, erase all the possible, connections, kind of like, a murderer, like a guy who accidentally killed someone, like in a Hitchcock movie or whatever, like, or Lieutenant Colombo, etc. Like, tries to clean up everything, the scene, and like come up with an alibi or whatever. So that was this situation, I believe. So yeah. So it's artificial but released unintentionally. But then people in power thought, we can use that. Let's go for it. And everyone, yeah, let's go for it. So yeah, that's what I think about it, basically. And there are some other points in anonymous Telegram channels, again, being made. And some of them I really like. Like, there is one anonymous Telegram channel which says that, makes a point that, with regards to Chinese flu, that medicine actually, like, its main purpose as a societal construct, it's basically to serve the rich. Okay, so medicine's main objective is to make the rich people live longer, so to speak. Well, I mean, not just the rich, but the rich and powerful, I should have said, right? Because there are other dimensions of power than just money. And so the majority of people to whom medicine is available, at the moment at least, I mean, we've actually done a pretty good job at making it accessible to more people recently, like last century, let's say. So the majority of these people are really just test subjects, because again, the ultimate goal of medicine, and again, I'm not talking from myself, I'm repeating the point of this Telegram channel, but I like it. So we are just the test subjects, because on us they can test the technologies. Like, roughly speaking, if you transplant the heart on 10,000 people, you would have much more experience in transplanting the heart and much more data, right? And then if there is a really important heart, if you know what I mean, to be transplanted, it would be done much better, right? So that's what I'm talking about. And hence, at the moment, which kind of supports this theory, experimental techniques are used like wider than anyone could have imagined. And by experimental techniques, I mean mRNA injections, right? And even more so, some new completely new technology. Well, this was sort of a completely new technology, but even other new technologies are right now emerging. Like literally a few days ago, or maybe a week ago, I've read some paper about some T-cells method of fighting the Chinese flu, and it's gonna be tested sometime soon, like maybe in a few months from now or a year from now. So yeah, like prepare for new tests, you cattle, you know. So yeah. Or stay in the control group, just as I did. I think that's the better choice. But anyway, so yeah. Instead, again, all those experimental techniques are being propagandized and even enforced, or like forced onto you, instead of using already proven and like solidly safe drugs. Like, you know what drugs I mean, and you know why I don't mention them here, which are effective against the Chinese flu and cheap, and like were used for decades already and have virtually no side effects, and a very good history of being used, etc. And connected to, so I've pretty much finished this point, even though I've added some of my own thoughts to it. So, and if you look at big pharma, proverbial, well, we can talk about it, like why is medicine so expensive in the US with respect to other countries? Long story short, it's because it's heavily regulated, as usual. If you don't allow free market, you're gonna have higher prices. Like the supply is artificially lowered, right? But we wouldn't talk about this. We'll talk about big pharma, and in particular, its R&D return on investment. And if I wouldn't forget, which I can, I would show you the picture right now on the screen. If I would forget, I will just upload it somewhere and put the link in the description. So the picture shows the return on investment in percent on R&D in big pharma. And as you can see, like in 2020, it was projected to go to 0 or even below. I'm not even sure it can be below technically. Never mind. Let's say to 0. But thanks to the Chinese flu, it has rebounded so significantly, and now it's about 7%, like just 2 years after, even though it took it like 7 years to go from 7 to 0%. Who could have thought, right? So when I said there are many interested parties, well, let's add at least one interested party, all right? Okay, so coming closer to an end, some concluding remarks again about Chinese flu. And again, why am I focusing on this so hard is because, again, it's part of the Great Reset, the Super Giga Omega conspiracy, right? But I'm just discussing my thoughts about it. Just as a related subject. Maybe I should have made like a second video about this, but again, I'm already making this one, so never mind. So the question is, okay, everyone jumped on this bandwagon of Chinese flu. So why are all these variants though? And you know, there's all kinds of issues with naming and stuff. So it almost looks like they are deliberately at this moment produced and released, right? But anyway, even if they aren't, why are they so why are they propagandized so hard in the media? And again, see my previous video where I talk about like what media says is basically our reality, right? It's our hyper reality, which is more real than real. So it may not even exist, but at least it exists in the media, which means it definitely exists, right? So why are all these variants? Well, it's because, and again, like, like British propaganda, which is probably like British intelligence is probably the most powerful culture of propaganda there is. They have actually, well, not they specifically, but all the propagandists, they have already established, and all the advertisers and stuff, they have already established that people get tired of stuff, which means that you need to renew the interest with new, like, quirks, with new plot twists, so to speak, right? So propaganda works best in waves. Like, oh, today we have an alpha variant. Oh, now a month later we have a beta variant. Oh, now 3 months later we have a delta variant. So all these waves, in the media. Kind of reminds you of a TV series or like, iPhones are released. Oh, iPhone 9 is released. Okay, let's go buy it. Okay. Then like a year later, iPhone 10 is released. Okay, let's go buy it. It's kind of the same thing, right? You should like inject the hype in doses, So I think that's the case with variants as well. Because, if you have like this horrible news that, there's a pandemic that's gonna kill all the world in like the beginning of 2020, and everyone's like, what are we gonna do? But like by, I don't know, September of 2020, everyone looks at it and says, well, okay, I don't see piles of bodies on the streets. I'm not dead myself. Like previous estimates of mortality were overestimated. And I'm kind of tired of being afraid. Maybe let's just proceed as we were previously. And then like horrific news. There's a new variant. It's so much more contagious. We don't know anything about it actually. Maybe you're gonna die after all. And you're like, oh man, maybe I will. And then you get tired of this in like 3 months, and they say, oh my god, there's another variant, guy, you should be relaxing, you should like stay in touch with the media, you should like be on the pulse, etc., etc. So this is what I think is happening. Okay, and the final thing I wish to mention before we conclude this is a moralistic moment. And in particular, like here I mentioned a lot of like rich and powerful people and what they do. You might think that I'm like against them. Like I'm like, what is the word? Condemn, is it? Judge, maybe. Like I judge them. I say that they are bad. They're like, we are, but it's completely not my pathos, not my motivation. I'm not here to tell you that, I'm a working class, I'm with you guys. I'm like, even though I'm dirt poor myself, I'm kind of, as a philosopher, I'm kind of actually beyond all of that, I think. Like, it would be really easy to say, these rich and powerful people, they're all evil, like, F them. But, like, we poor people should be together against all of that. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I'm just trying to, objectively would be a wrong word, but, neutrally is a better word, probably. Neutrally describe what is happening. So I'm not saying that rich people or powerful people are necessarily bad. I'm not saying that poor people, depraved people are necessarily good. I'm just showing you, hopefully, how the mechanics of the world works, right? Or at least in my opinion, right? Because I might be wrong, actually. Again, I've already quoted you some other people. They may be wrong as well, and I might be wrong in following them. But at least, hopefully, that gives you some food for thought. And that would be already a lot. That would be more than I've hoped for with this video. Actually, I didn't hope for anything. I was just expressing my opinion and some of the other opinions that I like. Okay, so let's conclude this rant. So we've talked about the Great Reset. My main point is that the Great Reset is an absurd notion because the elites are interested in preserving the status quo, and hence the elites would not allow any sort of actual reset to happen. Rather, what we are advertised with, I'm not sure if it's a proper word, with, what we are given as the Great Reset is actually like a smokescreen, an excuse to just proceed as they were, but at a more rapid pace. Okay, so the rich are getting richer faster, and the poor are getting poorer faster than previously. That's what they call the Great Reset, okay? But it's not a reset, it's just a continuation. Nothing changes, really, qualitatively. Quantitatively it does, but not qualitatively. Yeah, that was pretty much the main point. And obviously the governments are heavily involved, and there's a lot of interested parties in this. And then we talked about how self-ownership goes out of the window thanks to the injections, right? Then we talked about how depopulation as a reason of the existence of Chinese flu is a garbage idea. Because even though some people like Prince Charles would really like to depopulate the earth, hopefully more smart people from the elites, again, not meaning this in any sort of moral sense, just in a factual, power-oriented sense, are smarter, and they understand that depopulating the earth would hurt them more than anyone else, right? Because actually, it's the rich people who are benefiting the most from the work of the poor people, right? So the less there are poor people, the less stuff the rich people can acquire for their money. Hence, depopulation is stupid, but who knows? Maybe the elites are really stupid. I mean, governments are really stupid, but the elites, I mean, they're individuals for the most part, so maybe they aren't as stupid as governments. Okay, because governments are really stupid. Like, the intellectual level of any average government is like a 14-year-old, roughly. And they react accordingly, usually. So, and that's what you should expect from them. But an individual is much smarter than any government, as a general rule. Unless you have IQ of 70 or something. Maybe then you're dumber than the government. What else did we talk about? Yeah, that I've quoted this anonymous Telegram channel that medicine is actually a playground, a sandbox for development of technologies to ultimately treat rich and powerful. Hence, all the well-tested drugs to treat the flu are discarded, and all the experimental treatments are giving a freeway and propagandized heavily all over the world, right? So that we can test all these new technologies to further, like in the future, treat the rich and powerful more effectively, right? Well, by we, I mean the society, not you and me, probably. And then I talked about the wave character of propaganda and how the hype should be boosted by new doses, right? With each new variant appearing every few months or so. All right. I guess that would be all. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.